A Mafia boss, his tattoos black as his soul, looks across the cafe at a trembling waitress and laughs. He mocks her, calls her sweetheart, and tells her to clean up the mess he just made. But that boss, Don Salvatore Inzaghi, just made the last mistake of his violent life. He wasn't laughing at a clumsy server. He was laughing at Lucia Vesperi, daughter of the Capo di Tutti e Capi, which translates to boss of the bosses, sent undercover to test his honor. And Lucia isn't just here to serve coffee. She's here to end his reign of terror. This is the story of how one man's cruelty led to him weeping on his knees before the woman he tried to humiliate. Before we begin, subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I'm responding to everyone. The mahogany doors of Cafe Aurelia swung open at exactly 9 o'clock every morning, but the establishment hadn't belonged to its owner in over 3 years. It belonged to Don Salvatore Inzaghi, the man who now sat at the corner table like a king holding court, his black silk shirt rolled to the elbows, exposing arms covered in ink that told stories of violence most people only whispered about. The cafe itself was beautiful, almost painfully so. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, their light catching on gilt-framed mirrors that had watched 100 years of Naples society sip espresso and trade secrets. Marble floors gleamed under tables draped in cream linen. It should have been elegant. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it pulsed with the kind of fear that makes people forget how to breathe properly. Salvatore's men occupied 3 tables near the entrance, their jackets expensive, their eyes cheap. They didn't need to speak to control the room. Their presence was enough. Regular patrons had learned to arrive, order quickly, and leave without making eye contact. The tourists who wandered in by accident usually left before ordering, sensing something predatory in the air they couldn't quite name. But this morning, someone had miscalculated. Marco Castellano stood before Salvatore's table, his baker's apron still dusted with flour, his hands trembling despite his best efforts to still them. He'd owned the pasticceria 2 blocks away for 15 years, had survived recessions and health inspections, and his wife's cancer treatments. He'd thought that meant he was strong. He'd been wrong. "Don Inzaghi," Marco said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have the payment, all of it. I just need 1 more week." Salvatore didn't look up from his espresso. He stirred it slowly, the silver spoon making delicate circles against the porcelain cup. The sound seemed obscenely loud in the sudden silence. Even the hiss of the espresso machine had stopped. The barista had learned when to shut it off. 1 more week, Salvatore repeated, finally lifting his eyes. They were dark, flat, empty of anything resembling mercy. "You said that 2 weeks ago, Marco. You said it the week before that." He took a sip of his coffee, made a face, and set it down too hard. "This is cold. Maurizio, why is my coffee always cold in this shithole?" The cafe's owner, a dignified man in his 60s who'd inherited the business from his father, materialized from behind the bar. "My apologies, Don Inzaghi. I'll make you a fresh one immediately." "I don't want a fresh one from you. You don't know how to make coffee. You don't know how to run a business. The only thing you know how to do is take up space in a building I should own by now." Salvatore turned his attention back to Marco. "Like this one, taking up my time, making excuses. Don Inzaghi, please. My daughter, she starts university in September. I just need—" The slap came so fast, Marco didn't have time to flinch. It wasn't hard enough to knock him down. But that was the point. Salvatore didn't want him on the floor. He wanted him standing, humiliated, bleeding from the corner of his mouth while 24 people pretended not to watch. "Your daughter," Salvatore said, leaning back in his chair, We'll start university when I decide she starts university. Maybe she'll earn the tuition on her back, like her father's earning his extensions on his knees. You think about that, Marco. You think about what you're willing to trade. Marco's face went white, then grey. He opened his mouth, closed it, and stumbled backward toward the door. Salvatore's laugh followed him out onto the street, rich and resonant and utterly devoid of warmth. Pathetic, Salvatore announced to the room. These people, they borrow money, they make promises, and then they act surprised when I collect. He snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. Get me someone who knows how to pour a drink. This place is going to hell. That's when the kitchen doors opened, and a young woman with red hair stepped into his kingdom. She wore the standard uniform. White button-down shirt, black tie, burgundy apron tied at the waist. But something about the way she moved caught every eye in the room. Not graceful exactly, hesitant. Her red hair was pulled back in a bun that looked like it might come undone at any moment, and she carried a tray of water glasses with the concentration of someone diffusing a bomb. Salvatore noticed her immediately. "Who's that?" he asked, loud enough that his voice carried across the cafe. His men turned to look. The patrons studied their plates with renewed intensity. Maurizio, the owner, appeared at Salvatore's elbow like a ghost. "She's new, Don Inzaghi. Started 3 days ago. Please, she's still learning. I didn't ask for her employment history. I asked who she is." Salvatore's eyes tracked the girl as she delivered water to an elderly couple near the window. Her hands shook slightly as she set down the glasses. One of them sloshed, and she grabbed a napkin quickly to wipe the spill, apologizing in a voice too quiet to hear. "Her name is Lucia. Lucia Simon. She's from the south, I think. Salerno, maybe. She needed work. I needed staff." Maurizio's voice had taken on a pleading quality. "She's a good girl. Hard-working." "She's clumsy," Salvatore said, smiling now. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Look at her. Shaking like a rabbit that smells a wolf." And she was. As Lucia turned from the window table and caught sight of Salvatore watching her, something shifted in her posture. Her shoulders drew in. Her head dipped. She looked everywhere except at the corner table where Naples's most feared man sat, cataloguing her weaknesses like a butcher examining livestock. One of Salvatore's men, a bull-necked enforcer named Gino, leaned over. "Want me to invite her over, boss? Girl like that might appreciate the attention of a real man." Salvatore held up a hand. "Patience, Gino. You can't rush art." He lifted his empty espresso cup. "Besides, she'll come to me on her own." He was right. Maurizio intercepted Lucia near the kitchen, whispered urgent instructions, and practically pushed her toward Salvatore's table. The girl's face had gone pale under the harsh cafe lights. She approached with the tray clutched like a shield, her steps small and uncertain. "Don Inzaghi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "May I bring you something?" Up close, Salvatore could see she was younger than he'd thought. Early 20s, maybe. Pretty in that understated way some men overlooked, but Salvatore never overlooked anything. He made a show of considering her, letting his gaze drag from her scuffed shoes to her flushed face. "You're new," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. 3 days. 3 days and you still move like you're going to break something." He gestured at the empty tables around him. "You see all this space? You know why no one sits here?" She shook her head, not meeting his eyes. "Because I don't like being crowded. I don't like noise. I don't like incompetence." He paused. "Which one are you going to give me? Lucia Simone from Salerno." Her knuckles went white on the tray. "I'll be very careful, Don Inzaghi." "You'll be very careful," he repeated, mocking her soft accent. His men chuckled, right on cue. "That's sweet. That's very sweet." He leaned back, spreading his tattooed arms across the back of the booth. "Tell me, sweetheart, how much does Maurizio pay you to shake and stutter around his cafe?" I don't. It's not enough. Whatever it is." Salvatore's smile widened. "A girl like you, working in a place like this. It's almost criminal. You should be somewhere you're appreciated." The air had changed. Every person in Cafe Aurelia could feel it, the way animals sense a coming storm. Maurizio stood frozen behind the bar, his face stricken. Salvatore's men shifted in their seats, anticipating entertainment. Lucia clutched her tray tighter. "May I take your order, sir?" "Oh, you can take something from me," Salvatore said. "But first, let's see how well you perform under pressure." He snapped his fingers. "Gino, get the Barolo, the expensive one. Our new friend is going to serve me a drink, and if she spills even a drop—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Gino returned with the bottle cradled like an infant. The label alone cost more than Lucia probably made in a month, and everyone in the room knew it. He set it on Salvatore's table, along with a crystal wine glass that caught the chandelier light and threw red prisms across the white tablecloth. "Pour," Salvatore commanded, gesturing at Lucia with 2 fingers. She set down her tray on the adjacent table and picked up the bottle with both hands. The weight of it seemed to surprise her, or maybe it was the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes watching her every movement. She fumbled with the cork, her fingers slipping once, twice, before she managed to work it free with a soft pop that sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. "Steady now," Salvatore said, his voice dripping with false encouragement. "This bottle costs more than your entire wardrobe, more than your rent, probably more than your life, if we're being honest." His men laughed. It was an ugly sound, performative and cruel. Lucia's hands trembled as she tilted the bottle over the glass. The wine flowed dark and rich, filling the crystal halfway before Salvatore raised his hand. "Enough. I'm not a drunk." He lifted the glass, swirled it, made a show of examining the color. "Now, 6 more glasses. My associates are thirsty, and you're going to serve them. Think you can manage that without embarrassing yourself?" "Yes, sir. Yes, sir," he mimicked, so obedient, so eager to please. He took a sip, made an approving noise. "Go on, then. Don't keep them waiting." Lucia arranged 6 glasses on her tray with painstaking care. Each one she filled with the same trembling concentration, the burgundy liquid climbing up the crystal like liquid garnets. When the last glass was poured, she lifted the tray with both hands and turned toward the table where Salvatore's men sat waiting. She made it 3 steps. Salvatore's foot shot out from under the table, hooking her ankle with practiced precision. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. The trip was deliberate, theatrical, executed with the confidence of a man who knew there would be no consequences. Lucia went down hard. The tray flew from her hands, spinning through the air like a shield tossed in battle. 6 crystal glasses tumbled in separate trajectories, their contents painting dark red arcs across the pristine marble floor. The sound of shattering crystal was almost musical, each glass hitting at a slightly different pitch, creating a discordant symphony of destruction. The wine splashed everywhere, across the white tablecloths, across the cream-colored walls, across Lucia herself, who lay sprawled on the floor in a spreading pool of Barolo, her white shirt stained crimson, her burgundy apron soaked black. For 3 full seconds, the cafe was absolutely silent. Then Salvatore started laughing. It began as a chuckle, low and rich, before building into something bigger. He threw his head back and let it pour out of him, genuine amusement at the spectacle he'd created. His men joined in immediately, their laughter sharp and eager, performing for their boss like trained seals. Gino slapped the table. Another enforcer wiped tears from his eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," Salvatore managed between guffaws. "Oh, that was perfect. That was absolutely perfect." He stood, gesturing at the destruction like a maestro acknowledging his orchestra. "Look at this mess. Look at what you've done." Lucia pushed herself up onto her hands and knees, glass crunching under her palms. A thin line of blood appeared where a shard had cut her palm, but she didn't seem to notice. She kept her head down, her red hair falling loose from its bun, hiding her face. 6 glasses, Salvatore continued, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. His expensive leather shoes stopped inches from her hands. "Do you know what those cost? Of course you don't. Girls like you don't shop where I shop." He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. "And my shirt. Look at my shirt, Lucia Simone from Salerno. If you are enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button now." A few drops of wine had indeed splashed onto his black silk sleeve. Barely visible. Meaningless. "Ruined," he said. "Completely ruined. And who do you think is going to pay for that?" Lucia remained on her knees, surrounded by broken glass and wine that looked too much like blood in the cafe's golden light. Her shoulders shook, whether from fear or rage or simply the shock of the fall. No one could tell. She gathered her apron in both fists, the burgundy fabric bunched tight enough that her knuckles went white. "I asked you a question," Salvatore said, his voice dropping to something quieter, more dangerous. "Who's going to pay for my shirt? I will, Don Inzaghi." Her voice came out small, muffled by the curtain of red hair. "I'll pay for everything. The glasses, the wine, your shirt. You'll what?" Salvatore laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "You make what? Maybe €8 an hour. On a good day?" He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his pants. "Let me do the math for you, sweetheart. 6 Baccarat crystal wine glasses at €300 each. That's 1,800. The Barolo was 2,000. My shirt is Versace, another 800. Round it up to €5,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. That's almost 2 years of your salary, if you never eat, never pay rent, never do anything but work." He circled her slowly, a predator considering his prey from all angles. "But I'm a reasonable man, a generous man. I don't want to see a girl like you destroyed over an accident." Maurizio took a half-step forward from behind the bar. "Don Inzaghi, please. It was an accident. I'll cover the—" "Did I ask you to speak?" Salvatore didn't even look at him. "No, I'm talking to Lucia." He stopped directly in front of her. "Look at me when I'm offering you charity." Slowly, painfully, Lucia raised her head. Her face was flushed, whether from humiliation or the wine staining her shirt, it was impossible to say. Her green eyes were wet, but she hadn't cried yet. Salvatore appreciated that. Tears would come later. "There she is," he said softly. "There's my clumsy little rabbit. Now listen carefully, because I'm only going to make this offer once." He gestured at his men. "I have business interests all over Naples. Clubs, hotels, private establishments where a girl with your attributes could make €5,000 in a month, maybe 2 months if you're slow." The meaning was crystal clear. Several patrons shifted in their seats, desperate to leave but too terrified to move. An elderly woman near the window put a hand over her mouth. "I don't," Lucia started, but Salvatore cut her off. "You don't have a choice, sweetheart. That's what you need to understand. You owe me money. Money you don't have. Money you'll never have working here. He crouched down again, reaching out to tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. She flinched but didn't pull away. But I'm not a monster. I'm giving you options. You could work at one of my establishments. Nice places. Clean, air-conditioned. You'd be treated well. As long as you follow the rules. Don Inzaghi, she whispered. Please, there must be another way. Another way? He pretended to consider it. Well, I suppose you could refuse. You could walk out of here right now. But then I'd have to send Gino and his friends to collect what you owe me. And they're not nearly as patient as I am. He stroked his beard, the gesture almost thoughtful. They might decide to collect from your family instead. You have family, don't you, Lucia? Everyone has family. Her grip on the apron tightened until her hands shook. She kept her eyes down, fixed on the spreading wine that pooled around her knees like an accusation. So here's what's going to happen, Salvatore continued, standing and brushing off his pants again. You're going to thank me for my generosity. You're going to agree to work off your debt. And you're going to start tonight. Gino will drive you to the first location after your shift ends. He smiled. See, I'm even letting you finish your work day. That's how reasonable I am. Maurizio couldn't take it anymore. The old man had watched his cafe become a theater of cruelty for 3 years. He'd watched Salvatore humiliate customers, threaten vendors, turn a place his father had built into something poisoned. He'd told himself it was survival. He'd told himself he had no choice. He'd told himself a lot of things that let him sleep at night. But this was different. This was a girl young enough to be his granddaughter, kneeling in broken glass, while a monster decided how to destroy her. Enough. The word came out stronger than Maurizio expected. He stepped out from behind the bar, his hands raised in supplication. Don Inzaghi, please, I'll pay the debt, all of it. Just leave the girl alone. Salvatore turned slowly, his eyebrows raised in theatrical surprise. Maurizio, old friend, are you interrupting me? I'm offering to settle her debt, 5,000 euros. I'll have it for you by tomorrow. His voice shook, but he kept moving forward, positioning himself between Salvatore and the girl. She's new. She doesn't understand how things work here. But I do. So let me handle this. For a moment, something like respect flickered in Salvatore's eyes. Then it vanished, replaced by cold fury. You'll have it by tomorrow, Salvatore repeated slowly. You who are 3 months behind on your protection payments. You who can barely keep the lights on in this dump. You think I'm stupid, old man? I'll get it. I'll borrow it. The backhand came without warning. Salvatore's ringed hand caught Maurizio across the cheek with enough force to spin him halfway around. The old man stumbled, caught himself on a table, and Salvatore hit him again, this time with a closed fist, directly in the stomach. Maurizio went down like a puppet with cut strings, gasping for air that wouldn't come. He curled on the floor a few feet from Lucia, his face already swelling, blood trickling from his split lip onto the marble. You'll get it, Salvatore said, standing over him. You'll borrow it. You'll what, Maurizio? Rob a bank? Win the lottery? He drove his shoe into the old man's ribs, not hard enough to break them, but hard enough to promise he could. You don't get to make deals for other people's debts. You don't get to play hero in my establishment. Gino and the other enforcers were laughing again, energized by the violence. One of them raised his phone, recording. This would make good viewing later, something to share with the crew. Please, Maurizio wheezed. Don Inzaghi, get up, get behind your bar. Make my coffee properly this time, or I'll put you through the espresso machine. Maurizio tried to push himself up, his arms shaking. He looked at Lucia, still kneeling in the wine, and something passed between them. An apology. A farewell. Then something changed. Lucia's hands, which had been trembling since she entered the room, went perfectly still. The death grip on her apron relaxed. Her shoulders, hunched and protective, squared themselves. She took a breath. Deep, controlled, the kind of breath someone takes before making a decision they can't unmake. When she wiped her hands on her ruined apron, the gesture was deliberate. Methodical. She brushed the loose hair from her face with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of wine across her cheek like war paint. That was a mistake, Salvatore. Her voice was different. Not louder, but harder. Colder. The tremor was gone, replaced by something that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Salvatore froze. His men stopped laughing. Even Maurizio, struggling to his knees, went still. She'd used his first name. No Don, no Sir. Just Salvatore, like he was nothing, like he was nobody. What did you just say to me? Salvatore's voice came out quiet, dangerous. Lucia rose from the floor in one fluid motion, glass crunching under her shoes. When she stood at her full height, she wasn't tall, but she seemed to fill the space differently. The scared rabbit was gone. In her place stood something else, entirely. I said that was a mistake. She met his eyes directly for the first time. You shouldn't have touched him. Salvatore stared at her for 3 full seconds, his brain struggling to process what his ears had just heard. The cafe had gone so quiet that the tick of the antique clock on the wall sounded like hammer strikes. No one moved. No one breathed. Then his face twisted into something ugly. You little bitch. The words came out low, barely controlled. You forget where you are. You forget who you're talking to. He took a step toward her, his hands curling into fists. I was going to be nice. I was going to give you options. But now you're going to sit down and shut your mouth. Lucia's voice cut through his threat like a blade through silk. She didn't raise her volume, didn't need to. The command in those words would have stopped a charging bull. You're going to sit down, Salvatore Inzaghi, and you're going to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Gino shot to his feet, his chair scraping against marble. Boss, you want me to touch her, and you'll lose the hand. Lucia didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Salvatore, green and hard as jade. In fact, all of you stay exactly where you are. This doesn't concern you yet. Yet? Salvatore's confusion was shifting to rage, the kind of rage that had left bodies floating in the Bay of Naples. You think you can threaten my men? You think you can stand there in my cafe, covered in wine you spilled, and give me orders? Your cafe? Something that might have been amusement flickered across Lucia's face. Is that what you think this is? Your cafe? Your territory? She took a step toward him, glass crunching under her feet. Tell me, Salvatore, when was the last time you asked permission to operate in Naples? Permission? I don't need... He stopped, something shifting in his expression. Uncertainty. Just a flicker. But it was there. That's right, Lucia said softly. You don't ask permission anymore, do you? You've gotten comfortable. You've forgotten that every business you run, every protection scheme you operate, every breath you take in this city, it all exists because someone allows it to exist. Salvatore's face had gone red. A vein pulsed in his temple. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a waitress, a nobody. I'm giving you one chance to sit down. Lucia's voice dropped even lower, intimate and terrifying. One chance to remember your place before you make this worse than it already is. That was it. That was the moment Salvatore's control snapped completely. You want to see your place? He lunged forward, faster than a man his size should move, his hand reaching for her throat. I'll show you your fucking place. He never finished the sentence. Lucia's hand shot into her apron pocket and came out holding something small and rectangular. She didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't show even a flicker of fear as 250 pounds of tattooed violence came at her. Instead, she raised the object between them like a shield, holding it at eye level where he couldn't miss it. Salvatore's momentum carried him forward 2 more steps before his brain processed what his eyes were seeing. Then he stopped so abruptly he nearly lost his balance. His hand, extended toward her throat, froze in midair. The ID card she held was black, embossed with gold lettering that caught the chandelier light. But it wasn't the color or the quality that stopped him. It was the seal at the top, a complex crest that only a handful of people in all of Italy were authorized to carry. Below it, stamped in official script, were 2 words that made his blood turn to ice water. La Commissione. Still want to show me my place? Lucia asked, her voice deadly calm. Or do you want to look at the name on this card before you finish what you started? Salvatore's eyes dropped to the text below the seal. His face went from red to white in the space of a heartbeat. The name on the card wasn't Lucia Simone. It was Lucia Vesperi. The card stayed suspended between them, held steady in Lucia's wine-stained fingers. The gold seal seemed to glow in the cafe light, a crowned lion rampant over crossed swords, surrounded by 13 stars representing the 13 families of the Commission. But it was the name beneath the seal that turned Salvatore's world inside out. Lucia Vesperi. Not Simon. Vesperi. The blood drained from his face so quickly he swayed on his feet. His hand, still extended toward her throat, began to tremble. Behind him, Gino had gone statue still, his mouth hanging open. The other enforcers looked at each other, confusion giving way to creeping horror as they recognized the crest. Everyone in their world knew that seal. It was burned into the back of every made man's mind from the day they took their oath. La Commissione, the governing body that sat above all the families, that settled disputes, that maintained order, that decided who lived and who died when the old rules were broken. And the Vesperi family didn't just sit on the commission. They owned it. Had owned it for 3 generations. Don Vittorio Vesperi was the capo di tutti I capi, the boss of bosses, the man whose word was law from Rome to Sicily. Men like Salvatore answered to regional bosses, who answered to family heads, who answered to the commission, who answered to Vittorio Vesperi. The man whose daughter was currently standing in front of Salvatore, covered in wine, holding documentation that proved she could end his life with a phone call. You want to look closer? Lucia asked, her voice still that terrible calm. She stepped forward, closing the distance Salvatore's lunge had created, and held the card inches from his face. Read it out loud, Salvatore. I want everyone in this room to hear you say it. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes tracked across the text. The commission seal, the clearance level, Livello Uno, the highest, the authorization codes, and that damning surname printed in raised gold letters. His voice cracked. He swallowed hard and tried again. Lucia. Vesperi. Louder. She didn't blink. These people deserve to know who's been serving them coffee, who you've been humiliating, who you just threatened to traffic. Lucia Vesperi. The words came out strangled. Somewhere behind them, glass shattered as one of the patrons dropped their espresso cup. No one moved to clean it. And what does that make me, Salvatore? He couldn't answer. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. The hand he'd raised to strike her fell to his side, lifeless. Lucia answered for him. It makes me the daughter of Don Vittorio Vesperi. It makes me a member of the Commission's Internal Security Division. It makes me the person sent to audit your operation because certain reports suggested you'd forgotten how things work in Naples, that you'd started to think you were untouchable, that you'd begun treating this city like your personal kingdom instead of territory you're privileged to manage. She tucked the card back into her apron with deliberate slowness, never breaking eye contact. And this audit? You just failed it spectacularly. Gino made a strangled noise. One of the other enforcers started backing toward the door, moving with the careful precision of someone trying not to draw a predator's attention. "Don't you dare leave this room," Lucia said without looking at them. "Every man at that table stays exactly where he is. You're all witnesses now. You'll all testify about what happened here." Salvatore tried to speak, managed only a broken whisper. "Principessa, I didn't know." "You didn't know." She repeated his words with surgical precision. "You didn't know that the scared little waitress was Don Vesperi's daughter. So that makes it better? You terrorize civilians, extort honest businessmen, threaten women with sexual slavery, but it's all acceptable because you thought I was nobody?" "No, That's exactly what you thought." She turned, surveying the room. Every face watched her, caught between terror and disbelief. "He thought I was nobody, so he treated me like every other nobody he's destroyed in this cafe, which tells me everything I needed to know about how Salvatore Inzaghi conducts business." The full weight of what he'd done crashed down on Salvatore like a collapsing building. He wasn't just facing consequences, he was facing extinction. In their world, there were offenses you could survive: skimming money, losing territory, even killing the wrong person if you had a good enough excuse. But disrespecting the Commission, threatening the daughter of the Capo di Tutti or Capi? There was no coming back from that. His legs gave out. Salvatore Inzaghi, the butcher of Naples, the man who'd personally executed 17 rivals and ordered the deaths of countless others, the man whose tattooed arms chronicled a career of violence that spanned 2 decades, that man dropped to his knees in the middle of Cafe Aurelia with a sound like a tree falling. "Principessa!" The word came out, broken, desperate. "Principessa, please. Please, I didn't know. I swear on my mother's grave, I didn't know who you were." Lucia looked down at him with the expression someone might wear while examining a particularly disappointing insect. Would it have mattered? If I was actually Lucia Simon from Salerno, would you have behaved differently? Would you have shown mercy to some random girl trying to make a living? He opened his mouth, closed it. They both knew the answer. "That's what I thought." She circled him slowly, her ruined shoes clicking on the marble. "You want to know what my report was going to say before today?" It was going to say you were effective but heavy-handed, that you generated good revenue but needed monitoring, that you could be reined in with proper supervision. Salvatore's breath came in ragged gasps. His hands, those violent hands covered in ink and scars, came together in front of him in prayer. "Principessa, please, I have a family. You have a wife in Positano you haven't seen in 2 years, and a mistress in Rome you see every Thursday," Lucia said flatly. "You have no children because you're infertile, which is probably a mercy. Don't insult me with appeals to family when you just threatened to traffic a girl who might have had brothers, sisters, parents who loved her." The first tear cut a track down his tattooed cheek, then another. The butcher of Naples was crying, and his own men couldn't look at him. Gino studied the ceiling. Another enforcer found something fascinating about his shoes. The humiliation was complete. "I'm sorry." Salvatore's voice broke on the words. "I'm so sorry, Principessa. I was wrong. I was cruel. I forgot what we're supposed to protect. I forgot the old code. Please don't tell your father. I'll fix this. I'll make this right. You'll what?" Lucia stopped in front of him. "You'll suddenly become a different person. You'll magically transform into someone who doesn't enjoy terrorizing people weaker than yourself." She shook her head. "I watched you, Salvatore. When you hit that old man, when you threatened me, you weren't angry. You were enjoying it. This is who you are. No, I can change. I swear to you, I can change. Test me. Give me another chance." His hands clutched at the air between them, not quite daring to touch her. "Anything. I'll do anything. Just please don't make the call. The call." Lucia pulled a phone from her other pocket, not the cheap burner a waitress would carry, but a sleek, encrypted device. "You mean this call, the one to my father's office? The one where I report that one of his captains threatened to sell his daughter into prostitution? No!" The word came out as a wail. Salvatore bent forward until his forehead touched the marble, his whole body shaking. "Principessa, mercy! I'm begging you! Mercy!" His tears fell onto the floor, mixing with the spilled wine that still pooled around them. The mighty had fallen, and everyone in Cafe Aurelia watched in stunned silence as he prostrated himself before the red-haired girl he'd mocked, completely and utterly destroyed. Lucia stood over him, her finger hovering over the phone screen, the power of life and death literally at her fingertips. "Give me one reason," she said quietly, "why you deserve to keep breathing." Salvatore remained crumpled on the floor, his forehead still pressed against marble, waiting for an answer that didn't come. The silence stretched so long that several people in the cafe began to wonder if Lucia had frozen, if perhaps she was actually considering mercy. She wasn't. She was simply letting him experience the full weight of his terror, the way he'd let so many others experience theirs. Finally, she lowered the phone and slipped it back into her pocket. Salvatore's head jerked up, hope flaring in his wet eyes like a match in darkness. "I'm not going to call my father," Lucia said. The hope burned brighter for exactly 2 seconds. "I'm going to tell him in person. Tonight. Over dinner." She looked down at him with such pure disgust that several witnesses would later say it was worse than any violence. "And he's going to decide what happens to you. Whether you get a clean death or a messy one. Whether your operations get absorbed or burned to the ground. Whether your men get reassigned or buried with you. No, Principessa, get out of my sight." She said it quietly, but the command hit like a physical blow. "Crawl to your car. Drive to your apartment. Pack a bag. Then wait by your phone for instructions that will probably never come, because my father doesn't waste words on dead men." Salvatore tried to stand, his legs barely supporting him. His expensive clothes were stained with wine and tears and the remnants of his dignity. He looked at his men, searching for support, loyalty, something. They stared back with the blank faces of soldiers who'd already written him off. "Go." Lucia gestured toward the door with one hand, the dismissal of an empress banishing a peasant. "Before I change my mind and make the call right now." He stumbled backward, nearly falling, catching himself on a chair. Then he turned and half ran, half staggered toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The mahogany doors swung shut behind him with a sound like a coffin closing. Gino and the other enforcers stood frozen, unsure whether they were dismissed or detained. Lucia turned to them with an expression that could have cut glass. "You four, sit down. You're going to write statements about everything you witnessed today. Everything he's done in the past 6 months. Names, dates, amounts. You cooperate fully. And maybe, you get transferred to a crew that remembers what honor means." They sat immediately, pulling out phones and notepads with trembling hands. Only then did Lucia turn to face the rest of the cafe. 30-some people stared back at her. Businessmen, tourists, elderly couples. Maurizio still on the floor, clutching his ribs. Every face showed the same mixture of shock and fear and disbelief. She straightened her wine-soaked uniform, tucking her loose hair behind her ears. When she spoke, her voice carried the warmth it had lacked during the confrontation, though steel still threaded through every word. "Drinks are on the house today," she announced. "Coffee, wine, whatever you'd like. Sorry for the disturbance." Someone laughed, a short, hysterical bark, then someone else. Then the whole room seemed to exhale at once, the tension breaking like a fever. An old man near the window started clapping. Others joined in, the applause building until the chandelier crystals chimed in sympathy. Lucia held up a hand, stopping them. "Don't applaud me. I was doing my job. Applaud Maurizio, who tried to save a stranger at the cost of his own safety. That's what honor looks like." She walked to where the old man lay and offered him her hand. He took it, and she helped him to his feet with surprising gentleness. "The cafe is yours again," she said softly. "Really yours. No more protection payments. No more fear. Just coffee and conversation, the way it should be." Maurizio's eyes filled with tears, but these were different from Salvatore's. "Thank you, Signorina. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I still want that espresso you promised." And this time, the corner of her mouth quirked up. "Try not to make it cold. Power isn't about how many people fear you. It's about whether you've earned the respect of those who matter." Salvatore controlled through terror and forgot that true authority requires honor. When you build your kingdom on cruelty, don't be surprised when it collapses the moment someone stronger appears. The Vesperi family understands what Salvatore never learned. The real test of character isn't how you treat your equals, it's how you treat those who can't fight back. What did you think of Lucia's undercover operation? Have you ever witnessed someone powerful get exactly what they deserved? Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Next time, we'll explore what happened when Salvatore arrived at his apartment to find Don Vesperi's men already waiting.